Welcome, Millie, to the Conscious Early Learning Podcast. I'm so excited to be sitting here talking with you today. Thank you so much for being here. If you could explain a bit about your journey to the work that you do and how it relates to motherhood and how you support others with this.
Yeah, so previous to motherhood, so what I do is I'm a Mindbody Coach and I teach yoga, and wellness and self-care is a huge passion for me, for women especially. And my introduction into that really was, I did my beauty therapy diploma, and then I ended up working in spas overseas, and I worked in an Ayurvedic spa. And then that was the first time I realized that there was more than just the physical. There was this whole mind, body, soul way of viewing ourselves. So that was my first real kind of deep dive into that. Then I came home from Edinburgh and London and did my naturopathy training because I wanted to explore more about this. So I was on my journey with all of that, and I already had a real love in that training for the mind-body connection more than like the taking heaps of supplements or going and researching all of the drug interactions and stuff. I really loved the energetic side of it. And then I became a mum, and things went so AWOL and a whole lot deeper. So I had my little girl, and she's now 10. She was a dream. She was really easy. So that was a beautiful introduction to what I thought motherhood was for everybody. And so my little judgy self, I was wondering what was wrong with everybody, what's the complaining about? And then, we had our little boy, and so thankfully we had 4 beautiful years with just Frankie, and able to just have an experience of motherhood that way. And then I got the polarity, and so after having him, he was just born to be who he was born to be. And I have learned a lot about myself through that process of mothering him. So I ended up with postnatal depression and anxiety after him. And I hadn't had any previous mental health experience before. So that's really where the deepening began. He's now 6, and I got diagnosed when he was about 9 months. So probably just over 5 years ago, it took a turn that was just like, buckle up, we're going there. Yeah, and it has led me on this journey of what has now become the work that I do in the world, which is supporting women to really nourish and love themselves, to properly care for themselves, to explore why they possibly don't. There can be so many external influences that hold us back from really nourishing and looking after ourselves. And wanting to live that vibrant, happy, healthy, joyful life. Yeah.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you got yourself out of the funk of postnatal depression, but even how you came to the conclusion of that's what it was, and at what point you actually thought, okay, I need to ask for help. I need to dive deeper here and really, get that support.
That's a really good question, because it was not what I expected at all. In my mind, had a preconceived idea of what postnatal depression would look like. And that would be like crying all the time, really depressed, like in bed, can't get out of bed. It wasn't like that for me at all. I was very high functioning. I had my yoga studio. I was teaching 3 yoga classes a week. I was doing late nights with clients with my facials and my massage. I loved my work. I really, really loved what I was doing and was generally pretty happy in my life. And I'm a naturally happy disposition anyway. But I was so tired. And I did ring Plunkett actually when George was 6 months old and say, I just wonder if I might have postnatal depression. And we had a huge chat. And in the end, she said, I think you're just sleep deprived, and I think you probably need like some iron or something. Okay. So I started taking some supplements then, and I sorted his sleep out. We did sleep training with him, which was so brutal, but we did it and we got him sleeping. It didn't actually change. And so that's when I knew something's not quite right, because what was showing up for me was the tiredness, even though I was getting plenty of sleep, but also rage, like so much rage, which is not nice to have when you've got a baby and a toddler and a business that's in wellness. So like there was shame around that, and really struggling. And what I also noticed was when I would sit down at the end of the day, after dinner, it would be often when it would happen, I'd get this tingling, pins and needly feeling would start going down my arms and kind of up my neck. And I wasn't quite sure what that was at that actually what was the catalyst for reaching out for support. Because my mum said to me, maybe you've got MS. And so that's when I freaked out and Googled, of course you do, and thought, well, there are like a few symptoms. So yeah, I went into the GP and spent a bit of time with her, and I walked out with a diagnosis of postnatal depression and anxiety. And that really blindsided me. It's not what I expected, but it really resonated deeply after speaking with her and being held in that space and finally having permission to acknowledge what I was feeling. And I hadn't slowed down or stopped. I was filling every single gap. We had just finished building my dream studio. I was working. We were building a couple of flats in town, which I was basically the driving force behind, like nothing to see here. We've got our shit together. We're so busy. But actually, it was a real driver of fear driving a lot of that, rather than love of that. There's nothing to see here, because I couldn't understand it myself. So my journey, basically, I got the diagnosis and we spoke about medication. I wanted to try naturally. Obviously, that's my preference with being a naturopath. I was not opposed to medication at all. My husband's preference was medication. So we agreed to give it a month that we would see what we could do. So I got into a phenomenal psychotherapist and I started taking really, really good supplements for mental health specifically. And it was touch and go towards the end of the month. I was about 3.5 weeks in, and Rock did say to me, I think you're going to have to go on the meds. And I remember saying to him, you said I could have a month. And so within that next few days, though, things had already been improving and things turned around and I was able to manage it myself. And now I just have a really different relationship with my mental health. And it's something that I really have to prioritize. I have quite a delicate nervous system, especially having a son like George. He's highly sensory, he's highly sensitive, he's very strong-willed. So he gives me a run for my money with my inner work that I do. But yeah, I feel from the work that I've done, he's actually shone the light on a lot of stuff I was carrying anyway, a lot of emotional baggage that was just wanting to be looked at. It was getting too heavy. So that was the inner work I did. And it's really taking me on an amazing journey of getting to know myself more deeply and then understanding others and having so much more compassion for women and what we go through. And that, judgment is just, it's so good to be able to just put that down and really see people for where they are and know that they're doing the best they can with what they have, because it's not an easy gig. Yeah.
Oh, I can totally relate to that, especially with the part about George being strong-willed and they're just like this little torch that shines on all the pieces of you that you've just quite carefully been putting them down and nothing to see here. And then all of a sudden it's just like, wow, okay, I'm feeling this rage. I'm feeling triggered. And although it is, if want for a better word, infuriatingly challenging, it is some of the deepest and most transformative work that we can do. And from meeting and getting really close with you from the beginning of this year, I can see and I can attest that you are the walking embodiment of what it is to really nourish yourself, and how that just has like the biggest ripple effect, not only on your family, but in your community. Like like when I'm in a place where I'm feeling overwhelmed or like I need something to fill my own cup, I'm like, what would Millie do?
Oh, I love that. From just completing your Elevated Woman program, I feel like I've gotten so many tools added to my tool belt of how it is meant to be, like how we're really actually supposed to be living life. And I think that brings me to my next question of, why do you believe that community and connection are such a pivotal part of self-care? Well, yeah. We are pack animals is the way that I see things. We are not meant to be on our own, and that is individually, but also within our family unit. And we are in a time that we are so isolated. And it's so much to do with women being in work. And this is a huge thing that I notice, and I'm very conscious of trying to find that harmony and that flow within. because I was so busy when I was working that I was so disconnected even from myself when I was so busy. And then I took some time. I'd come through my postnatal, was really looking after myself. We had another unexpected event happen where we were burgled, and I ended up with post-traumatic stress, and I couldn't stay where we were. We had to move. We sold the property, and I knew I needed time to heal, because the guy that had burgled us was in the paddock next door, and he got away with it and continued to live there. So it's a lot to live through for my nervous system with 2 young kids, a husband that does shift work who's coming and going, and this guy living in the paddock next door that knows our house inside and out, that's pretty unhinged. That the safety, that primal need for safety was gone. And so I ended up taking 18 months off work. I didn't know how long it was going to be, but I ended up with 18 months of not working, and we'd moved at that point. And holy moly, my capacity as a woman and as a mother was so much more. And you don't know what you don't know. I think for some people, maybe that got the opportunity to stop working during lockdown, that was where I had a glimpse of it. And then I got to fully experience this in a bigger way, that I had so much capacity to connect with other women and to check in on them, or if they're having a hard time, to actually make a meal. And I had capacity, and even now, like for me, a real measure of success is having the capacity to have other people's kids in my house. Because once upon a time, that was not a thing for me. There was no way. I had enough trouble dealing with my own kids. There's no way I want somebody else's kids just like totally riling up the craziness. So that for me, what that connection, that community comes to is, like, I have to stay connected with myself. I really have to support and nourish and care for myself so that I can be a part of my community and that I can have that ripple effect, because I know what I put into myself ripples out. And I want that ripple effect to be really positive, not to be toxic, not to be judgmental. I want it to be open and loving, and therefore I can hold space for others and their struggle.
I agree that ripple effect, once you are so connected within, you're able to then be a part of your community and actually give back from a place of overflow, rather than trying to fill your cup up, but as soon as you fill it up, it's getting poured out somewhere else. So connection with self first always, and then that's really going to help you to build your connection with others in your community.
That's what I was going to share on that as well, was the vulnerability. That is what the biggest gift of that experience of postnatal depression was vulnerability, because I wasn't going to share about what had happened and what I was going through, because I felt so much shame around it, especially because the industry that I was in was around wellness and, you know, really taking care of yourself with yoga and massage and facials. Like, I've got it all together. This is all amazing. But it felt so hard. I felt embarrassed that I didn't have it all together, and I wasn't even aware of it. And so I nearly didn't share it, but I had a very overpowering drop in that I needed to share this, and I needed to share it while I was in it. And I did, and it created the most amazing experience of connection through vulnerability, which is Brene Brown's work. That's why she's created an entire career out of this. And I can see how, because of my experience with it, it has been life-changing for my experience of life, with sharing more of who I am without feeling like I need to have it all together or be perfect, because I'm so far from it. I just am what I am. And through accepting these parts of myself that aren't perfect, I have so much more capacity to accept others and their imperfections and just see them for and receive them for the way that they are and where they are at. So I really think that inner connection with self and the ability to be able to be vulnerable and be brave in that space is what creates the most beautiful connection and what builds community.
I think that is one of the most powerful things, is to have that vulnerability and that openness. And I've found that myself with having this conscious early learning business. It's like, man, I need to now have it all together and be perfect and be this perfect parent. And as soon as I put that pressure on myself, or try and create this facade of everything having my shit together, that's where people stop relating, because it's not realistic. 100%. We are like absolutely not robots. And so that's something that I've really brought in quite strongly within the conscious early learning world, is it's not about being perfect. It's not about having everything completely as you want it to or as you expect it to be, and doing the deeper, that shadow work, and looking at places within ourselves that we don't want to and we don't want to accept. It's like, well, that's actually where you need to look first, because that's where you are going to make that change. And if you're not having that self-awareness, if you're not aware of where you're possibly wanting to make a change, then that's autopilot. You're just going to keep going on that same path until shit probably hits the fan.
Or breakdown. Yeah, shit hits the fan. That's right.
So it's like this part of self-care is all about doing regenerative practices, and that is something that you are so huge on. And I think rather than trying to build you up from like a heap on the floor, actually putting these things in practice before you get to that stage. So even something that I have changed hugely this year is looking at what I'm putting into my body, because as we know, like food is made up of different frequencies and obviously different macro and micro nutrients. But I'd love to hear from you about how does nutrition and digestion impact our holistic well-being?
Yeah, I love this topic because, and also like you, I love a treat. As you know, right before we began this, I'm sitting here eating my little homemade Afghan with my cup of tea, and I love that. I'm not really strict and rigid, and that's a big part of my work. And like you say, you're not going to try and be this perfect parent that has it together all the time. This is not relatable, and maybe it's achievable, but probably not for most people, and certainly not for the women that I want to work with. I don't want to have women that are only going to be able to strive for perfection. That's not my vibe. So when it comes to food for me, it's about consciously eating. So I know that the bulk of the food I put in my body is a high frequency. We've got like a veggie bin that comes every couple of weeks that's full of beautiful organic veggies. So I do my best with that. But I still buy veggies from the supermarket. I do my best. Same with the fruit. I get organic if I can, but there's plenty that comes from the supermarket, and I love my treats. But I do my best to be conscious when I'm eating. And my biggest thing is, if I'm going to choose to have a treat, I am choosing it, and I am all in on it. I am not going to feel any guilt. I am going to just receive every single little bit of nourishment that's in there, even if it's just energetic. I'm going to take it. So I think that's a really key thing for me is, if you know that you're way out of balance, get the support to be able to put more nourishing food. And it doesn't have to be crazy expensive, to keep things simple, but then also to know how we digest our food can relate to how we are digesting life. So if we are on the run and we're not sitting down to receive the food with gratitude, then possibly this is reflective of how we're living our life. Are we living our life on the run, go, 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 busy, busy, busy? Taking that time to really process the food, rest and digest, to get into that state of stillness, then gives us this opportunity to digest our life better as well. So it can be very reflective if you have digestive issues, to start to get curious about how are you digesting your life? Are you holding on to things? Like constipation can literally be holding on to shit. So the shit in your body, but also like just emotional shit in your life. What might need to be let go? What are you still clinging to? So these little reflections that our body will show us. The body is so much wisdom. It's an interesting topic to go down the rabbit hole on.
And I love that your business is called Mindbody Alchemy, because that is just like a reflection right there of the work that you do and how holistic it is. Because that saying that you just mentioned, and it's about how you do one thing in life is how you do everything in life. So being able to make those connections, and I'm most certainly guilty of eating on the run, or I think from starting to drink cacao, I'm like putting gratitude into that every time. So it makes me think, okay, not only just when I'm having like this beautiful drink can I sit down and give time and gratitude and consciousness, mindfulness to it. It's something that I've become really, really aware of is, there's a reason why in certain religions prayer is done before food. Because I think how you're mentioning about being really conscious of, even if it's a treat, just being conscious of enjoying it. Because when you
comes from,
putting that frequency into the food, like our power of intention. So one person could be eating something and been thinking, oh, this is really bad for me. Oh, this is going to make me put on weight. Oh, I shouldn't be eating this, but oh, it's got sugar and this, that, the other. And the other person could be eating the exact same thing, and yet they are putting the intention of love, gratitude, honoring all the places and things and people that came to be to get this in my hand so I can enjoy this delicious treat because yum. That's two very polar opposite kind of.
The polarity of how we receive something can be huge. And so choosing to receive it with love and gratitude, exactly, that's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, digestion is a bigger topic than just digesting our food.
That's it. Yeah.
I would love to hear from you about what you think or what you know, your knowledge on the impact of stress and how it can affect us as mothers. And as you know, my audience is also early childhood teachers. So how can stress really impact us on a holistic level?
It's often stored in our bodies, and then our bodies will never lie. So we can be holding it. And it can be also driven. There's so many layers and factors that can cause a stress response within our body. And so it's starting to get curious if we're noticing patterns that are showing up a lot for us, a stress response, because it might be a physical response to stress where we feel our heart racing, we might feel our skin prickling, we might feel our muscles seizing, our breath will change, and so really starting to recognize our body's response to stress and what's been the trigger, because the triggers can be really deep. This is another huge topic, of course, but understanding that there will be something, and it's usually some kind of unmet need. There's some kind of desire that we are not meeting when we are having a response of stress in a moment. And so if we are regulated and if we're nourished and we're resourced, often we've got so much more capacity for the challenges when they come. If we're running on empty and we haven't put into ourselves, this is when so often we will experience stress because we've stretched thin already. We don't have anything to give. We don't have the capacity. And that's where, as mothers and in early childhood learning environments, there's a huge amount of output, a huge amount. And it's pretty consistent for the time that we're with the children. And so really prioritizing, it's called radical self-care. This is what Audre Lorde she teaches on and kind of paved the way of radical self-care. And she says that it's not a self-indulgence, it's a self-preservation, which is an act of political warfare. And I love the quote of that. It's like, that's how seriously we need to take this putting into ourselves, because our energetic frequency is going to ripple out. So of course, if we're feeling stressed, the biggest impact is going to be on the children around us. They borrow from our nervous systems. So for us to feel regulated, calm, soothed, they can then borrow when they are not. And this becomes our responsibility as adults to learn how to deal with our underlying triggers, and then also have those micro, frequent resourcing of putting into ourselves. So we're creating constant capacity to be able to give and lend to these little ones.
Yeah, and something that I love what you speak about in terms of regenerative habits and habit stacking. Could you just have a little riff on that?
Yeah. So that's something I also feel really passionately about, is there's a lot of talk about sustainability and sustainable habits. But to sustain is like just to kind of keep the same as a baseline. That's my interpretation of sustain. So to be able to shift that word to regenerative, so that you're rebuilding, you're putting in, you're topping up. It's more than just keeping it a baseline. It's like, how can I pour into myself? So that regenerative kind of care is so important. So it's knowing what that is for you, because it's going to be unique for all of us. And then habit stacking is such a powerful way to start to identify, like, where am I doing something where I can be doing something else that is going to be nourishing for me. So for instance, a little habit of mine is when I click my seatbelt, to pause and take a full breath in through the nose, expand the belly, full breath out. One breath. But that one moment to pause and almost bookend. It's like it kind of closes a little chapter of like, I've been doing this, I'm clicking in, and now I'm moving into another chapter of moving my body from here to here. I can unclick and I can do the same, but it's the click in for me. That's my little moment of like, okay. And like my nighttime ritual I love me a ritual. I love going through all of that. My latest addition to that, and I was telling the girls in Elevated Women in my program, is that I've been getting on the Shakti mat at night. That was what I've added in. Because the Shakti mat just soothes my physical body. It brings me back into myself. It brings all my circulation forward. I love a Shakti mat situation. But I also wear my little LED mask for my skin. So I put that on, I get on my Shakti mat, and then I put a meditation. And so then in that 15 to 20 minutes that I'm on the Shakti, I've got the LED, three things that are all regenerative. They're all taking care of myself and nourishing. Four really, because then I'm also preparing myself for sleep. And so these little things and these little ways that we can like be doing something anyway, because that's what I already do for myself, and then to put something else in with it that just adds, like elevates the experience. That's what a ritual is to me. It's like elevating the ordinary. How can I make this like a little bit special and a little bit more nourishing for myself?
I love that so much. It is like the perfect segue, because I also wanted you to share with us about sleep and rest and how many people don't realize this is such a crucial aspect of self-care and of just literal survival as well.
Yeah, it's the number one. So if there was going to be one that was the most important, the foundation of what we're speaking about today, it's sleep, because everything builds from there. If we're not sleeping well, we're probably not moving because we're too tired, we can't be bothered. Or if we are moving, we risk injury because we are not working at our best. If we are not sleeping well, we are probably not eating well because we're so tired, we're going to have more caffeine, or we're going to reach for that sugary treat instinctively to lift our energy and give us the quick hit. So when we can really, really care socially as well, the community and the connection, if we're not sleeping well, we don't have the same amount of energy and capacity to connect, to be able to look after anybody in our community and to stay connected with ourselves. So prioritizing sleep is key. I'm passionate about my sleep. I love it. I'm a 9-hour girl if I'm getting my optimal. This is me, but I mean like 7 to 9 is usually like most people's optimal range. So knowing what yours is, I think, is so important, because yours might be 5 or 6. It might be, and that is all good. Yours might be 10. And if you know it's 10, how can you prioritize 10? How can you structure your evening to wind down, get yourself into bed, to give you that sleep window, that sleep opportunity of 10 hours? Because you're still going to want to give a bit of time for that settling in and getting off to sleep. And it does start in the morning. That's my biggest thing. It's like waking up. You set off that little circadian rhythm by seeing the natural light, not through a window, not through glasses, being out in the natural light just for a few minutes, just to set up and expose, especially if you know that you struggle with sleep, trying that alone to just expose to natural light. And even like it's something I'm conscious of in the mornings, I won't put my sunglasses on. If I'm going to go out and say drop the kids on the bus, I'll try and just let the natural light come in and flood my brain as much as possible to get that rhythm going really, really well. So I think that's really important in the mornings, is how we set ourselves up. And then following the natural rhythms of light. So it's a bit trickier in the summer, but especially in winter when we are in that more shorter days where we are in New Zealand. But closing down the house as it's coming on dark, I love putting the house to bed. So closing everything and putting some low light. Feeling like I'll match the outside light as much as possible to help my nervous system and my brain know we're winding down. It's time to start slowing. And knowing that every hour that we're watching a screen can put another half an hour of just like, what's the word? It bumps out the melatonin being released. It delays the melatonin. And that's an important thing to understand, that if you're going to watch TV, then we are programming our brain to struggle more, to slow down, and we might go to sleep, but it might not be the most quality sleep we want to be having. So just the little things of unwinding and just getting an old-fashioned book out and having a read with some low light for that last little bit before you go off to sleep.
And I think we can also relate that to our children as well. I mean, I'm guilty of using a screen as a tool every now and then consciously, but also trying to get the children outside for 5 to 10 minutes. I was really, really good with my first, every single morning we would be outside, we'd be doing a little walk no matter the weather. But I'm finding like with having my second, it's a rush of trying to get everything done in the morning. So it's like those reminders that, hey, it might be only 10 minutes. And then automatically my brain's like, oh, but he's not going to want to come inside. But if we're doing it every single morning as a habit and saying, okay, we've got our 10 minutes of outside, saying good morning to the sun, putting our bare feet on the earth, this can come under that habit stacking and creating that nourishing setup for our sleep as well. So that's what I love about everything. It's not only for us, but modeling the self-care for our children, but it's also our children's self-care.
Yeah, that's it. It is the modeling of that this is just what we do. This is just who we are. We're people that care really deeply for ourselves and will prioritize ourselves in this way in a world that I don't see that it's conditional, but I just do see that it is the way that it's gone. We're so conditioned to be disconnected. We've got things pulling our attention left, right, and center with our phones, with screens, with things that are addictive. They play on us, like they are designed to pull our attention and to get us down the rabbit hole and stay us swiping and scrolling for hours. This is not creating connection, even though it's called social media. It creates disconnection because we're not in our world. We're in another world that's virtual. And then we're also usually judging ourselves against that world in the process. But it's not even an accurate representation of anybody's reality. So you can see how damaging it can be to our mental health, being on our phones too much or on screens too much. That being in nature and letting that be the primary thing we observe, that keeps us in our natural rhythms. That brings us home to ourselves and helps us remember how we best function and how we best operate to be able to give to the world.
Yeah. And so what are the different types of environments, and then how can we optimize them? Because I know you talk about an environment as in this is a physical place, but then we've also got different atmospheres and how these all kind of mesh together.
Yeah. So there is our physical environment. So being aware of what is around you and having things as simple as you can have them and loving what you live with. I think simplicity is key. Doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, I love me an op shopping experience because I'll find something that I will really resonate with the frequency of, and I'll feel like, I wonder what your life has been. You're coming with me and you are going to elevate my stuff. I love that. So I love the physical, but then we've got our spiritual environment with our connection to source, to God, to universe, spirit, whatever it is. I think when you look at every culture across the world before they were even connected, there's so many similarities between their spiritual practices. And so there's got to be something in it. And I certainly believe it for myself. So I never put any of my stuff on anybody else. But for me, my spiritual practice is a non-negotiable. That's a daily. I love prayer. I love meditation. I love just connecting into my higher knowing and my higher wisdom. And that can take practice because we also live in a world where we are so often taken away from our intuition. We're told what is right for us. We're told what to do. And we're often told not to question things, that just, this is the one right way. But for us to really tune in and stay connected to ourselves to know what is right and what's going to feel good for us is really important. And that mimetic environment is really important. That is our social media, screens, TV, the news, these external influences that don't always serve us. They often don't. And so really being discerning on what you consume from external resources, that is this lifting me up? Is this benefiting me? Or do I need to be a little more mindful of how I am, what I'm exposing myself to? So there's different ways we can look at environments, different types of environments, but really coming back to us just noticing how we feel, how we're showing up in the world, and is this working? But it is so much about what we expose ourselves to, and we can be quite discerning with it if we're conscious with it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a work in progress.
It is.
I think everything that we've covered today, this is the optimal. This is like, if everybody could put all of this into practice, what a world. What a world. We wouldn't even need it. Like, it almost cancels each other out, eh?
This is the ultimate goal, though. It is that creating this as a way of life. And hopefully one of the biggest takeaways from this is that anything we talked about on these different areas of life where we can weave through intention with the stress, with our environment, with our movement, with our food, with our whole well-being, most of it's all micro stuff. Most of it is like, there's always going to be the odd macro thing, but I honestly believe that's a big part of my work, is educating people in the micro and being consistent with the micro and not discounting it because it doesn't seem like a really big thing. But actually, if you can do this one thing and choose one thing from what we've talked about to bring into your day, or there might be one thing that we've talked about that you realize isn't serving you, that you could remove from your day, and then be consistent with that. And it's that compound effect over time. Compound interest is a big thing, and that compound interest that we receive on our little and oftens, our like choices that we make that are really nourishing and good for us, it starts to shape who we are. And that's a big question. If I'm checking in with myself, it's like, who am I being? It's not what am I doing, because the do is all good and well, but that's very masculine energetically. The real feminine energetic is the being. So I want to check in with who I'm being in this world. How am I showing up? And is that serving me and my community? And that's where we just get to be curious and make the little tweaks and changes where we can see something that might need it.
And that all comes down to that key word of being conscious.
Yeah.
So if we can be in our bodies and we can be the observer of our mind rather than letting it run the show, that's how we can make these little changes, and it's actually possible. And when you start believing in yourself, it's like a ripple effect. When you start believing you can make these changes, you start making the micro changes, that compound effect really, really not only changes and transforms your own world, but it transforms the entire trajectory of the children in your life. So being able to practice this, and go back and listen to this podcast like 20 times over. There is so much gold in here. Millie is not only a dear friend, but an absolute aspiration. And I think I would love for you to share how people can work with you, where they can find you. I'll put it in the show notes. But I just really love this opportunity for you to speak about your offers and what it is you've created with Mindbody Alchemy.
Thank you, Sarah. I just adore you as well. I love everything you stand for. You never cease to amaze me with what you do, with the way you love your children, you care for them, with the work you're doing in the world, which is game-changing to bring this level of consciousness into the space, and with that whole being. And that's, I suppose, why we resonate so much. It is such a holistic approach to the way we show up in the world, and then supporting others to do the same. So I work one-to-one with clients. I love supporting women in leadership. That's a real passion of mine that I have found myself in. Self-leadership is huge for me. That's the work I do on myself every day. And so that is something I love supporting women with, because like you were sharing before about the beliefs, like our beliefs become our reality, and boy, oh boy, beliefs can hold us back. So really doing the deep work. I love the deepest of conversations. Nothing's ever off the table in my world. And then I've just started teaching yoga in person out in Bayview in Hawke's Bay, which I just had my first class this morning, which was amazing. I had about 20 women come and join me in the most incredible space. And I'm about to launch, it's probably launched by now, my first day retreat. I do a little day workshop and retreats at Crab Farm. I just find things that I love to share and do, and they arise. So Instagram is probably the best place to find me. I've got my website, mindbodyalchemy.co.nz, but Instagram is where I spend most of my time. It's Mindbody Alchemy. I think that's it. Mindbody.alchemy. I'll be there. You'll find me. Thank you so much for having me. I love this.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your way of being and your energy with the Conscious Early Learning community. And if you're in Hawke's Bay, get amongst this day retreat. You'll see me there. I am all for it. I cannot wait. And I just appreciate your magic in the world, Millie. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. You're amazing.